Hello, welcome back to the YouTube channel of Bethel Evangelical Free Church Hanley. I'm Pastor Gervais Charmley. This is the second video I've done on a Yorkshire church, and this a North Yorkshire church, and this is the church of St John the Baptist, Kirk Hammerton. Kirk, of course, is an old word for church. In Scotland, they still use the word Kirk, and the further north you go in England, the more you find the word Kirk appear in names of places. And of course, Kirk Hammerton tells us that there's been a church here for a very long time, and this is it. This church was built around 950 AD. That's right, this building is over 1,000 years old. Now, it's been greatly enlarged. In the 12th century, they actually built a big aisle onto it. Today, there is a whacking great Victorian church where the aisle used to be. But the little Anglo-Saxon church is still here. 1,000 years later, over 1,000 years later, it's still here, it's still used, and you can still see pretty much exactly what it looked like originally. Now, unfortunately, of course, what they've done is they have covered up, they've scraped the walls, the plaster's gone. Obviously, there are no original windows left. The whole of the north side has just been taken down and replaced with an arcade, but you've still got this nice chancel arch behind me. You've still got the nice west tower, and you can see here basically this is a classic English church, and this is a classic English church that's been here again for 1,000 years. We'll have a look around, and I'm just amazed. There are so few Anglo-Saxon churches left. And you'll see why as we go around. So let's do that. So here we are. We're starting with the Anglo-Saxon church, which these days is otherwise known as the South Aisle. It's quite common, of course, to find this where you've had an enlargement. I say actually it's not very common. Normally what they do is they pull down the little old church. But here, as in a couple of examples I can think of, what they've done is that they've just kept the little old church as a little aisle on the south side, and it's really good they've done that. You can see through there, incidentally, beautiful Victorian work. We've got here the Royal Arms of George III are restored on the Golden Jubilee of Elizabeth II in 2002. Window, that's obviously a 15th century window, that sort of size and that sort of shape. As you can see, part of the north side of the arch there has been restored. The south side is shows you why it's been restored. It's a little bit rickety. We've got here, this is the 12th century arcade that divides the Anglo-Saxon church from the later, and basically later now is Victorian. So we proceed up the Anglo-Saxon church here into the chancel. This is now the Lady Chapel, and this is why you've got at the top there this whacking great Victorian mural of the Annunciation, with of course the text in Latin, and it all tells us this was a very high church, sort of influenced by the Oxford movement and the Cambridge ecclesiologists. They've got your very, again, nice piece. St Anne teaching the Virgin Mary to read. It's a very common image, of course. Iconography of the Virgin Mary, and a reminder. And women, teach your daughters to read, and fathers, teach your daughters to read, because it's a good idea. And looking west here, you can just see how tiny this is. This is a tiny, tiny church, and this is why, because yes, that is the entire west wall. And again, a bit of a lean to it, but that's what happens, I suppose. You whip off the north wall, and then it has been here for 1,000 years. So. And here we've got Sedilia and Piscina. The Piscina's really interesting. Have a look at the Piscina, because that's the top of a pillar Piscina you can see there. So it's been moved from the Norman church to here. There we've got St John comforting the Virgin Mary after the crucifixion. So it's all, and this is rather nice. Looks very much like the head of a bed, actually, but I'm sure it's not. I'm sure it is because of all the artwork, it does look like a 17th century reredos. Again, quite rare. Someone's collected that. Bit of a boring east window, but there we are. And of course, St Cecilia, St Agnes, and St Agatha. So you've got the Lady Chapel. Very often you get this female saints theme, and that's a good idea, actually. There's St Lucia up there with her lantern, a bit obscured by the light, ironically. A good idea, reminding us that of the important part that women have played in... Sorry, I just fell down something. Don't worry, not serious. I simply missed a step. I will not... I won't have to pause the video, but... oh dear. Just jarred my shoulder very slightly, but I'll be all right. So the shoulder's okay. There's the organ. You can see the pipes in there. Those are the actual organ pipes. They're not decorative. It's always rather good. Nice 2 manual down there. Locked, of course. They don't tend to like... I mean, this here says, This is James and Binns of Bramley, Leeds. So it's a Leeds organ. And there's the... Yeah, definitely Anglo-Catholic, isn't it? With all those candlesticks. And there you've got St John the Baptist and St Peter. And John the Baptist, of course, is holding the church, model of the church, because it's dedicated to him. And then here we've got what's her name? Hilda of Whitby, I expect. And that's going to be St Paulinus of York, I expect. And then you've got this Victorian painting. The Victorians, they love their paintings. And then you've got this nice roof up there. And this is all Victorian. There's no piscine and Sedilia, because the piscine has been moved into the Lady Chapel. Back through the rood screen. Nice rood screen. Again, Anglo-Catholics, so they like their rood screens. The nave and chancel, bog standard Victorian. They're nice. I mean, it's not hideous, but it is very, very Victorian. Whereas the obviously, I think it suffers a bit by contrast to the Anglo-Saxon church, which is 1,000 years old, over 1,000 years old. It was about 1950. It would have gone to 1,000. We've got here a little model. There's a nice little model of the church there. Little model of the church, and this is very much what it's like today. And you can see you've got your Anglo-Saxon, and then you've got your Victorian. And there it is, the Anglo-Saxon and the Victorian. And the Norman. Just those Norman columns, because those pointy arches are later. So that is really, really very interesting. And as I say, this is what's important about St John the Baptist. Kirk Hammerton. He's incredibly ancient. And at the back we've got some diagrams showing the development of the church. It's always, again, interesting. So here we've got the red stuff is their top one, pre-conquest. And then you've got... and pre-conquest, we don't know who it's dedicated to. Early 13th century, we know it's dedicated to St Quentin. And 1834, St John the Baptist. Why do dedications change? Well, very often they change because what happens is that in the post-Reformation, people aren't actually that bothered. I mean, Protestants aren't bothered about church dedications. With the end result that sometimes they change. Sometimes someone reads about, say, the altar of St John the Baptist at Kirk Hammerton, and they think, oh, well, it must have been St John the Baptist Church. No, actually, it was a side altar, and actually the church is dedicated to St Quentin, but they don't realise that until it's been too late. They call it St John's for too long, and they're stuck with St John's. So there we've got some memorials that will have come from the 13th century church when it was basically pulled down by the Victorians. That's the Victorians for you. I mean, its walls kind of still exist within this, but there's nothing really visible as the 13th century, is there? And we've got some memorials that they've taken down and put up there. There's the old font. Now, can we get around to the font? Yes, we can. And you can see this is an 18th century font, and that's why it's been banished to the back here, because they didn't like the neoclassicism. Victorians, honestly. And there we are looking east. I mean, it's a gorgeous piece of Victorian Gothic, but it kind of pales in comparison, it does just pale in comparison to this little ancient building that it is attached to. And there we've got the Victorian font, which is imitating the 15th century, which is fine. But it is, as a Victorian imitation. So that is the inside here at the glorious little Kirk, well, not so little anymore, but the glorious little Kirk Hammerton church here. So we'll go outside and see what's to see up there. And so here we are outside at Kirk Hammerton. That's, of course, the Anglo-Saxon church, the 1,000-year-old church behind me. And it is raining here at the moment, not very much, not very heavily, and it should go away fairly soon, but it is raining. And it is a bit wet underfoot, so I should be very, very careful after what happened in the church. Do not worry, I'm fine, and if this video goes up, then it's because I am fine. So let's look around the outside, shall we? So here we are. We start, of course, with the Anglo-Saxon church. You can see there the tower, the typical Anglo-Saxon tower openings at the top. That's where the bells are, and it's quite vertical. Again, that's a very Anglo-Saxon thing, that they're quite tall, narrow churches. And none of the windows are original. Probably that little slit one is the closest to what the original windows would have been like, except, of course, they would have been round-headed. And you can see that it would have been teeny tiny. It's teeny tiny, and here's your whacking great Victorian thing next to it. And we'll see as we go around how much of the 13th century church is left. I don't know. I do not know how much 13th century church remains, because it's been a while since I was last here. So we'll have a look around the outside, and there's you can see the contrast there between the rough stone of the Anglo-Saxon building and the very, very neat stone by the Victorians, because of course Victorians, you've got machines for cutting stone and that kind of thing. And so it is very, very say machine heavy, and yeah, just a technology really. AD 1890 it says there, so that tells us when the Victorian bit is built. 1890, 950 and 1890. And oh yes, it's all again round here. This is all Victorian stonework. So both sides are basically Victorian. So yeah, let's see what's at the west end, but I think again that's largely Victorian. On the footings of the 13th century church. That over there, by the way, is not the church hall. That's an old chapel. I think it's a congregational chapel. Yeah, there's an old stone coffin, again, high status. And yes, we've basically got a Victorian church attached to a little Anglo-Saxon one. Yeah, do the big house over there. And yes, that is it's now closed, sadly. It was actually at one point used by the Roman Catholics, the old chapel there. So very interesting contrast. Almost basically about 1,000 years, well, less than 1,000 years between the two. And there we have your Victorian and your Anglo-Saxon joined together. Very interesting. As I say, it's one of my favourite churches, this one, because it is just such a contrast betwixt the Victorian and the Anglo-Saxon. But thankfully, actually, it's amazing really how it survived. Just because I suspect the site, it's because it's where it is. They thought, well, rather than rather than just building a new building or extending it to the south, we'll just keep it and just build another church onto the north, and that gives this lovely, lovely building. And so here we are. That's Kirk Hammerton, St John the Baptist, formerly St Quentin, formerly we're not sure who, because St Quentin is a Norman saint, and so wouldn't have originally been St Quentin. There we are. You can see behind me. That is what a church of 1,000 years ago looked like. And it's a humbling experience to stand there and go, 1,000 years look down upon us. It's a marvellous building. It's teeny tiny, much extended, much loved. And if you're ever in North Yorkshire, in this area, it's a really lovely little place to visit. It's always open. So thank you for watching, and may God bless you and keep you until next time.